So, hello everyone. Thanks again for joining us. This is Steve Taylor here for another episode of the Do It For Yourself podcast. But this one's going to be a little different. I have a really great guest. We're going to have a different conversation. We're not really talking about doing it for yourself, but we're talking about a subject matter that's really important, right? That goes for different professionals out there, lawyers, financial advisors. It's a really, really interesting topic. So, let's start this out. My wonderful guest, Eric. Give us a little bit of your background, who you are, what you do, and then we'll go into this discussion on estate planning. But one I've had many many times throughout my career, but this is going to be very very different.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Excited to be here with you. So I'm Eric Negron. I run an advisory firm out of Austin, Texas. I am a recovering banker. I started my career in banking and private banking and commercial lending and dealing with folks that have money. And I've been an advisor or in financial services for close to 2 decades now, or as I like to call it. And I've been into helping people make money decisions and help people live better business.
That's awesome. Yeah, man. I've been there just like you. I've been giving advice in one form or another for over 2 decades myself, right? And so, for those people that know me, my audience, they know that I'm somewhat, I'll call myself a recovering attorney, but it's not really recovering. I still do some attorney-ish work here with my clients. And so, this topic is really a big one. It's a big part of both our practice, right?
Mhm.
Estate planning, right? Everyone talks about estate planning, the importance of having a plan, having this all together. But I think one of the biggest hurdles that I see out there is the ability for someone to get quality advice to do the plan, right? They'll think they want advice, maybe they won't follow through, whatever it might be, or many get intimidated by maybe the conversation or the price of hiring an attorney. So lo and behold, over all these years, right, in this kind of mix between the legal and the financial advising, something else comes about, right? These
Yeah.
other platforms, these providers. So talk to the listeners a little bit about that, Eric, because I know you've embraced this fully. Kind of what are these tools and how does it allow you to really assist the clients more in depth with doing their estate planning?
I, I think if you're listening to this right now, you I'm going to go on a limb and say you are the type of professional who wants to be an advocate and you want to be the primary source of advice for your client if you're listening to this. And I think when it comes specifically to estate planning, we need to talk about what it is and why these tools are so important for what it is in today's world. So for me, estate planning is just writing one giant love letter to the people that you care about predominantly. So if something happens to me, I want my wife, my spouse, my children, the charities I care about to be taken care of. And I want to do it as efficiently as possible. I want to give as little money as possible to Uncle Sam, and I want to make sure that when people find out that I'm gone, all my money is accounted for, because there's an old saying that says where there's a will, there's a relative. So, and that's a true statement.
Love it.
So fast forward, we kind of set the foundation for like estate planning and why it is such a crucial topic. But what's happened with the financial planning profession is that more and more technology companies have come to our space to basically evolve everything that we do, from our CRMs to financial planning to investment management. And lo and behold, they have now come to our space, and there's a rise of estate planning tools that allow advisors to guide their clients through the estate planning conversation. Hey, if something happens to you, who do you want to get these assets? What types of things should you consider? Wills versus trusts, power of attorneys, HIPAA documents, living will, whether you want to be on life support. And I would argue, who better to have this intimate conversation than the advisor, who more than likely is the one that knows about the client's hopes and dreams and deepest aspirations and is dealing with their money and making and seeing what happens in the family environment than the financial advisor. And so these tools have now come into the marketplace to really allow for advisors to to play a more active and direct role in facilitating this important conversation.
Yeah, it's really, I'll give you some of my background here on this. Well, when I was practicing law many, many years ago, the firm that I worked at, you'll hear there's some lawyers that they would charge a lot of fees, right? And they would charge by the pound.
Yeah.
They would create these documents so long that no one would ever read them. And I remember one time that the managing partner sat down with me and he was lamenting. He was saying, "Hey, Steve, we do all this great work for all these clients and put all this thought and effort into these documents, but then we don't know if people ever fund them, right? If they ever do the proper tiling or anything like that,
Mhm.
as we know is so important." So let me start by saying, first of all, that, from the legal side, because I still do as a lawyer, right? We won't go into it too much in depth, but I'm able to do legal estate planning documents for my clients. But also, I'm the financial advisor, and I'm adopting these tools because, first and foremost, let me say that this is not LegalZoom. I will tell you, over my decades of practice, all the problems and nightmares I would see by people sitting down, going to LegalZoom, pulling down a form and doing it themselves, it's a disaster. This is something totally different. This is a structure that gives a lot, takes care of a lot of the important items. And it's the advisor really sitting next to the client and going through it. So to that end, Eric, when people, I really want to make that clear. This is not the client doing it themselves, although it's client led. How do those conversations go? And when someone hires you, because I think it's really, really cool how your firm, you charge a separate fee for assisting for this work, which I think is awesome. Walk us through a little bit of how that looks, of how writing by the client, maybe whether or not you run into limitations with the software that would require an attorney intervention. Maybe any attorneys listening in here to maybe for them to think that, may or may not be that this is, a competition to them. I think it could be something that could really enhance relationships with even other attorneys.
Yeah, I think what's interesting for the attorneys that are listening into this, I mean, let's be really frank. They they've been embracing tools like this for a long time. There's Pro Docs and there's different platforms that attorney use that basically templatize 99% of the forms that are out there. And then they go in and make customizations based on the clients that they have, or they go in and they get the documents and they just customize it for how they like to write their documents. And, I've been doing this for close to 2 decades. I've seen all sorts of plans from attorneys, and this is not to knock them, but I think the difference with the estate planning process that we go through and that advisors could go through with these new tools that are out there is that traditional estate planning was like old school financial planning in the sense that it was done for you instead of done with you. So the new estate planning tools allow the advisor to do estate plan with their clients, to have the conversation, to answer the set of questions, and then the documents get generated. So in our firm, we are constantly having the conversation. So with existing clients that we have, one of the things that we do as we go through our reviews is, hey, do you have a estate plan in place? And boom, that'll put it on our radar the second that the client tells us no. And so every time we're going to have an interaction, we're going to try to push the ball forward to get those things done because we think it's critical. And the challenge with the traditional estate planning model of let me just send it to an attorney is this. Most clients do not want to get financially naked with another professional and open up about their finances and their goals and their priorities and their family's intricacies and the different nuances or that are going on in the family. And so what we found over time is that it was a barrier to people actually getting it done because they didn't want to have to go and talk to somebody else about what's going on in their life. And so what we found the second that we brought in these new guided, done with our client estate planning technology tools is our implementation rate for those clients that we had been following up with, in some cases, 2, 3, 4, 5 years to try to get them done was like, hey, we can do this in a Zoom meeting together. We can go through the questions, and then our team can put together the set of documents for you. And then, oh, by the way, we can have somebody come to your house and notarize the documents, or you could do it on the equivalent of Zoom. So that's with the existing clients. But what the thing that I found most interesting is, and this is going to be super important for, financial advisors or attorneys or insurance agents that are listening to this podcast, is this: there is such a massive opportunity to have this conversation, to use estate planning to drive clients to have broader conversations with you about their overall financial planning. Because think about it, when you do estate planning, it's who are you? Who's in your family? Who do you want to care for? What are the things that you have? What do you want to have happen to said things? And then the step that this process allows the advisors to play, which I think is super impactful, is that the advisor can make sure that the estate plan actually gets implemented. Here's the reality: there's only under 40% of Americans actually have a completely written estate plan. And out of the 40%, I would venture to say 50 to 60% of the 40% is outdated. And not to mention that probably out of that percent, majority of them haven't even funded the damn document. So they went and they saw an attorney, they sat down and they did their documents, and then they never went and retitled accounts or changed beneficiaries. So there's a lot of ex-wives right now that are thanking their ex-husbands that got something out of their ex-husband's estate because of a breakdown somewhere, and making sure things are properly updated.
Eric, I love so much of what you said there, man. The one thing that really struck it for me was you say, you're doing the estate plan with them and it's not being done for them. That's always was, I'll say, a challenge during my practice. I'm a big believer in simplifying things and everything. And I would try to simplify everything as we go through the process, just to explain to the client what decisions they had to make. But many times throughout it, I know they really kind of didn't understand. I could tell by the questions they would ask, or whatever it might be. And so I would do the best that I can to try to get that done for them. But this is awesome. This puts responsibility on the client. We're going through this. Like, these tools will go through the questions and explain the questions, and they have the opportunity to ask. And I really love how that part of it, that this is being done with them. And the other side, the point you bring out, and it's really, I've always, I've thought about it differently. And I'll be honest with you. I was an estate planning attorney first, right? My background, and then I came into the financial planning.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I thought people's conversations with me on their estate planning was as personal as it gets, right? This is who I'm leaving my money to. This is who I trust to make decisions, right? Anything that can be there. So when I've moved from focusing primarily on estate planning law to financial advising, oh, this was going to be a natural transition. People would come with me. They're already trusting me on the estate planning side. But I was wrong, dude. Completely wrong.
Yeah.
They saw me as an estate planning attorney, but now when I'm talking about their money, that's completely different. So now when we have that conversation, to your point, that they've already opened up and given us everything to actually work with us and comfortable speaking to us to get that done. Absolutely, I see that they want to work with us to get that done, and so it'll really, really raise the probability of this getting this done, because so many people, we tell them get the estate planning, but they don't feel it, or they don't do it. But when you have this trusted advisor kind of to bring them along, that's a huge deal.
Yeah, I think to me, I think it's super, super impactful, because the reality of it is that I would almost say it's easier if you're an advisor who's listening to this and you do, I hate the word, but I'm going to say it, comprehensive or complete financial planning, or holistic, or whatever the buzzword of the day is. If you do that, we're in the unique position. We already have all of the information, the stuff. And so we are already quasi having these mini estate planning conversations, even if we're not doing full blown estate plan. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, on this account, if something happens to you, who do you want it to go to? I'm sorry, if your advisor listening, that is estate planning advice. You're talking about beneficiaries, right? And to me, this just allows us to broaden the conversation and the perception of you as a professional when you're having this most critical conversation with a client or prospective client is you will be invaluable. And to me, this conversation is multi-generational impact,
Yeah.
right?
No.
And I can't stress that enough. And that's why this is so critical. I love estate planning, right? I think you did it reverse, Steve. You started as an estate planner. You came in a couple of years ago. I was exploring. I'm like, oh, I'd really like to get a LLM in taxation and get a JD, and I was going to do it reverse because I was seeing so many opportunities to have a way better conversation around estate planning, and the tools that exist now for advisors to have this conversation didn't exist because I was having a Wayne Gretzky moment. I was like, the puck is going here. Asset management's being commoditized. Everybody says they're doing financial planning, but they may or may not be. The conversation has to be around estate planning, and taxes are the biggest things to drive value for our clients.
Yeah, it's amazing. You make a great point, Eric. A good conscientious advisor who's been doing it long enough really is almost as experienced and knowledgeable as many attorneys are, especially attorneys who are just coming into the practice, into the whole process. So they're really qualified, but they don't have that, well, it's JD and then, Esquire to be able to
Yeah.
practice law. So let's move to that issue, right? Because a lot of the attorneys that will be listening in here, and as I came into it a little skeptical, because I'll say now, to step back, I will say the majority of the estate planning I've done in my career, okay, like 90+% is cookie cutter. It's
Yeah.
literally changing names, certain scenarios, put them in there. There's really no complexity. But there is situations where more complexity is needed. And I will tell you, for those listening, complexity is not driven by the amount of net worth they have. Complexity is driven by complexity. You're divorced, you have multiple kids, you have the different businesses, right? That's what makes something complex rather than just the value of their estate.
Yep.
So, and as I'm working through this and going through these tools, right? The attorney in me, we all like to do it our own way, right? Like you said before, put our own little flavor on it, whatever it might be. So as you're coming into those situations, right, where there is complexity, right, that maybe you, because even though you're not a JD,
Yeah.
maybe more advice is needed. How do you navigate that situations within your tool versus maybe like bringing in an outside attorney?
I mean, there has to be a certain sense of intuition. Like my when you're having a conversation with a client, those of you know, like when you start having conversations, off the bat if you're going to need to bring in somebody based on the level of conversation, based on the level of questions or the complexity the client's bringing. So depending on what the client has going on or the level of complexity, that tends to be a driver of, oh, I need to go bring in one of my attorney partners now because this situation merits it. I know this particular client's temperament and they're going to want that, right? They're going to want to sit there across from somebody. And I think that's perfectly good. Like, let's be perfectly clear. This type of estate plan that you and I are talking about here is probably for 80% of Americans. It's the non-taxable estates, non-complexities, plain vanilla most of the time, but maybe with a little bit of nuances. But the normal stuff that's taxable or complicated, or people have, lots of moving parts to their life, that stuff is still going to the attorneys. And quite frankly, that's really where most estate planning attorneys make their real money. It isn't doing the basic will or doing the basic trust or doing power of attorneys. That stuff is kind of plug and play outside of the conversation with the client and making them feel heard. So to me, I still think there's attorneys very much have a role in this process, and they're still very much a part of the collaboration of what happens.
Yeah, it's I couldn't agree more, Eric. And really, like you say, you'll be able to identify early on when something has some complexity. And I think a great point to make to the attorneys out there is that by advisors using these tools, yeah, they're taking care of the simple ones. But we're bringing, you're going to advise, refer to them, the complex ones, the ones, like you said, where they make the money, where there is complexity, where there's additional work that needs to be done. So these attorneys are going to be getting, better clients on that end. Now, for the other ones that we work with, like you said, you agree, the vast majority, we can do it through this process, through these tools. And what's most important about the advisor led is that it gets implemented, because very few attorneys, whether complex or whether advanced, a lot of them don't do the implementation. Some of them do, right? Some of them try to do, or they'll send you a letter to do it. But the implementation of these plans is really everything, because if you have these great documents and they're not titled correctly, it's going to go outside. Because many people, let's say if you're a person thinking about doing your own will and you're listening to us, maybe you're an advisor as well. And when I ask people, like, do they have a will? They say no. I'm like, yeah, you do. You have what the state says happens to your assets if you pass away. But it's incumbent upon you, if you want to change that, right? Go in and change that. I think those are great points about, I think that's where it works well and dovetails with the attorneys, and you bring them in. Now, for advisors out there, there's a recent KITSIS article that came out talking about these, right? And they talk about the navigation of the unlicensed practice of law, right? And I can speak to that a little, but let me get your viewpoint on that, Eric, as a financial advisor, someone with all this experience, someone who has wanted to maybe go get that JD. That issue about what may or may not constitute legal advice, is that a big issue for you? Does that come up, or how do you, as an advisor, financial advisor, non-lawyer, navigate that?
I mean, I'm gonna just say I think it's BS.
Okay.
I think here's the thing about most financial advisors. Most financial advisors are rule followers, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the most creative ones figure out, especially if you're doing estate planning or tax planning, on how to operate and
Right.
bend the rules like the matrix to your will. So to me, I don't think that's an issue whatsoever, because if you're not holding yourself out as an attorney, this is no different than your client going to LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer and answering a set of questions. The difference is, in this guided, done with your client estate planning, is you're there to answer like common things that they may have. Like, hey, if I leave my money to my kids in a trust, how are they taken care of if they're minors? Oh, well, did you know that the trust provides for health, education, maintenance, and support, right? Like, these are things that if you're an advisor and you take yourself seriously, you should have been long before sitting in on the estate planning conversation with your clients and the attorney that you were introducing them to a long time ago. So you should have heard the damn story a million times already, so that if a client's coming to you and this done with you estate planning, well, you can say, hey, this is what it means, because you've heard it so many times. So to me, like, I think it's nonsense, and I think it's just potential scare tactics from attorneys that are worried that advisors are going to take their lunch money. Because let's be honest, financial advisors are one of the largest source of business development for estate planning attorneys. It's not the other way around. I mean, literally, most estate planning attorneys, it's a one-way street. You drop the bag of money over on their side of the wall, and it's never coming back to you. If they get an opportunity, because it probably came from some other advisor that they were working with. Okay, and that's just, I'm just keeping it real for you, the estate planning attorneys. But here's the other thing that I would liken it to, is this. Okay, a lot of people do their personal taxes on TurboTax. Have they put CPAs out of business? Heck no. I mean, the best damn CPAs I know are busier than they ever been. They don't want the basic W-2 tax return, okay? They don't want the simple stuff. And quite frankly, most estate planning attorneys would prefer the stuff that's got a little bit more complexity, so that they can get their billable hours and they don't have to work, a million hours to make a buck and take care of their family.
Eric, I love your answer, man. Tell us how you really feel. It's
Hmm.
BS. It's beautiful. So let me add to that because I totally agree. But let me give it from the point of view as an attorney, someone licensed to give
Yeah.
legal advice and has for many years, right? So the issue of unlicensed practice of law really primarily comes down to two things, which they say is the practice of law, and then everything else is really gray, and we'll throw it in that BS bucket, right? Because
Yep.
attorneys could argue for it, but it's really not. So, number one, to represent an individual in a court of law, you must to represent someone who is not yourself, right? You
Yeah.
can always represent yourself. To
Yeah.
represent someone who is not yourself, you need to have a license. That number one is the practice of law.
Yep.
And then I will tell you in the second one, which is in the similar, somewhat related to what we're doing here, but you nailed it. Number two is creating legal documents, okay, for
Mm.
clients to sign off on as to and giving that kind of advice. That has been seen as the practice of law, right? So to your point to say that we are not preparing the document, right? The software, the technique, the tool is all there. You nailed it. Anything else about the actual aspect of giving advice, I'm not even really going to say it's great. It's not legal advice.
Yep.
Everything that advisors and everybody talk about, you talk about the rules, right? Those are based on the laws. Are those legal advice? No, there is no requirement that you have to be a lawyer to read a statute and tell someone what the statute either clearly means or what you believe it means. That is like that. That is not the practice of law. So I could not agree more. I think you nailed it. The issues of unlicensed practice of law are really made bigger than they are, and that is the kind of the bar, somewhat of them, to try to feel that we don't want you encroaching in our area. But to your point, man, when I heard about these tools, I was exactly like you. I said, "Oh, this is TurboTax for estate planning."
Yeah.
Right, to go there and get it done. Because me, as I have an accounting degree, I don't have a CPA, but I use TurboTax because it's a great tool. It shows me all the rules and everything in it. It helps us within that. So that's what this is. So I mean, for those advisors out there looking to get in this but concerned about that, don't listen to the naysayers. It's not the benefits that you are bringing by getting people to get the advice and implement all the items that they should be doing are drastically outweighed by any possibility that you're not going to be getting in trouble because you're not practicing law. So I think that's a wonderful way to address it and say this is really the comprehensive planner, right? What they're bringing together for their clients to add value.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I love, this is my favorite conversation to have. In fact, uh, I find it to be more value driving than starting with financial planning, because this kind of gets to the core of who is this person that I'm talking to, what is important to them, and what type of a human being are they, right? Which really, there's been a lot of folks that have talked about values based financial planning. Well, how the hell do you get an understanding of somebody's values? And I'm going to tell you what, you do it through the estate planning conversation. I've found it to be so pivotal in helping to inform and guide the financial plan, because I have a real good understanding of who the person is and what's important to them and who do they care about. So,
You nailed it, buddy. And look at who you're talking to, right? I've built my practice primarily, especially in the early years, as they came to me, "Hey, Steve, can you do my estate planning?" Right? Because they knew me as an attorney. Well, sure. Let's come in. Let's sit down and talk, and that just opens the door. It is the great primary conversation to have because it really is top of mind for most people, whether they just had kids, whether their parents, might be aging or other issues have come up. That drives the conversation and then opens the door. Okay, listen, all this great planning's on the top. Now let's work on all that stuff underneath, right? To really meet all those other goals now that we've gotten that, taken care of.
I was going to say, the other thing too is, like, if you're an advisor who's listening to us, a financial advisor or an insurance person, having this conversation, and I don't want to cheapen it, but I would just want to, because I know a lot of you are sitting here looking at the year is getting ready to come to an end. You're trying to figure out how to finish strong and to drive your revenue. But this conversation around estate planning with your clients, will create more opportunities for you to grow your practice through doing more business with your existing client and getting more of their wallet share and becoming sole provider for the entire household. Not only that, but it will make you more referable to your clients, because there'll be conversations that are had that goes like this. Oh, I just got my estate planning done, to their friend or somebody that they care about that's close. And they'll be like, oh, really? Yeah, I've been meaning to do that too. Who helped you? Oh, my advisor helped me. Oh, really? How did that work? Do you think you could help me too? If I told you how many times that conversation happens in a given week in our firm, it would blow your mind about how much additional opportunities present itself because of that. Then if you're offering this as a service, you can now take this and bring it to your strategic partners and your professional circle, and basically go to family attorneys to business attorneys. You could go to real estate lawyers. You could go to other professionals and say, hey, listen, this is a service that we provide at our firm for clients in this particular situation. Keep me in mind. You'd be surprised how much stuff comes in from that type of conversation, and just being like, hey, I'm complete. I can talk to people about money, taxes, and estate planning.
Yeah, Eric, and I think you really, this is impactful, and this is why I like having these conversations where you talked about like being the trusted advisor and the client being comfortable with you. Because I will tell you through my experience in going through this, as the estate planning attorney, I thought I was a trusted advisor, but I was not. I was a task taker. I put some documents together. Years would go by. People would forget who I was, where it was, right? So that thought that that you needed, that barrier to get in there in front of the attorney, it's really it holds back a lot of people. And this is such a wonderful tool. And let me say another thing to you, Eric, and I think this would be great for all the listeners out there and all the other different advisors, because I've had this come up many times. If someone has legal documents together and they want to change it, there is this belief, I don't know where it comes from, whether right or wrong, that you need to go back to the attorney that drafted the documents to change them. Let me tell you that you do not, right? There is that belief. So anyone out there, even if they have documents, but they haven't done it in a long time, and listen, the law changes, different provisions. That's another wonderful thing about these tools, is that as the law changes, these tools automatically update their documents for the change in the law. Let me tell you that many attorneys out there that have been doing this for many decades, they do not do it. If they are doing their own templates, they are not updated. So in many ways, you're getting the higher level with these documents, and these tools are putting it together because they are being updated by attorneys that work for these companies. So that if you have done your planning, but you want to update it, this is a great route to go as well. So Eric, listen, we're coming to a little bit to the end here. And you already said it, but let me, put back on your Wayne Gretzky strategy here. What's come about from these, in the last couple of years, like you said, it's been transformative. When these tools came out, you don't need to do it. Where do you see, or what do you think the future of these tools, or maybe tools in other areas, right, that are out there that are kind of ripe for financial advisors to step into?
Yeah, I think I want to dovetail what you just said, and then I'll tie it into the broader thing, which is Steve. Steve, you hit the nail on the head. If you've got clients who have old or outdated estate planning documents, most of the time now, the attorneys are going to rewrite the whole damn document from scratch, anyways. The beautiful part about being on these platforms, because I just had it happen the last 2 weeks, clients like, hey, I want to make some changes, and it's so inexpensive and efficient, and then boom, the documents are reset with whatever new provisions that are built into them, like that. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits of these tools. And then kind of where do I see like this conversation and broader conversations? I think estate planning is going to become more and more entrenched into the financial planning process. I see there being more tie-in to tax, especially in 2026 when things revert back to lower laws. So I think the tax planning aspect of estate planning is going to become an issue in 2026. And I think the software will start tying in taxable estates and some more advanced planning. I think it'll evolve into allowing LLCs to be created by advisors guiding the process. I think you could see FLPs. I think you could see irrevocable trust. I think that the possibilities are endless. And I think what the technology companies will do is they will democratize it, and they'll actually start going after attorneys as well who want to just use this as a way to streamline the as you and I put it, the TurboTax side of their practice.
Yeah.
And I think the other things that advisors should be thinking about is tax planning, right? If you're not doing any sort of tax planning, you need to be doing it. And I'm going to give them a shout out because we just signed a contract with them. But Holistic Plan is probably one of the best tools out there. We've had a Thomson Reuters tax tool for a very long time, and we get super geeky on our tax analysis. And I think Holistic Plan coupled with estate planning, I think it's a game changer. So that's kind of where I see it going on. I think advisors, if you're listening to this and you have questions, like feel free to send me or Steve a note on LinkedIn. And I'm going to share this with Steve as well. I will also give you our estate planning pricing sheet and the guide that we use with clients that answers their 5 most important aspects of their estate planning. So you guys can see what I use. You can feel free to copy it, give it to your graphic designers, give it to Fiverr, put it on your firm's brand, whatever. But I'll just give away my secret sauce to you.
That's awesome, Eric, and I really appreciate it. And listen, let me tell you to build upon what you said as we wrap up here, is that I'm an attorney. I have looked now, I went more to start focusing on this area when the software, like you said, these tools on the attorney side came about. What I didn't like about them was that they were pretty much too attorney driven in the sense that they gave you every option that you want to put in there. You can build in for complexity and all the like, which made them almost more difficult to use than my templates, right? And you could run into problems. Like I was always concerned, listen, this thing is so robust. What if it throws in a provision there that I am not expecting, and it could throw off a lot of the other planning that we did? So I found those to be very dangerous. Why I adopted this, and it's really because I'm coming at this from both ends of it, right? As the advisor and as the attorney, I'm working that edge of it. It does bring it together, but it simplifies it and it puts the guardrails that make sense, right? And that really where these people should be, because as you will say, Eric, right? The more complexity is just there for complexity, and people don't implement it. The more you can simplify it and explain it, it's going to get implemented, and you're going to get great outcomes, which is what we all want. And I agree. Potentially it might allow for more complex. Listen, there's a lot of firms out there that do very, very high-end complex planning, and this tool will allow them to be more of that trusted advisor because many times the attorneys come in, they really add more challenge than they do help, as we've all experienced. But that's a different podcast for us to have. So listen, Eric, I really appreciate all your time today, man. Yeah, I really appreciate you putting that out there, man. You're making me rethink about that. And Holistic Plan just sent me an email before we came on here. But I think this has been really great. And yeah, anybody else who's listening to this, reach out to me, reach out to Eric. Let us help you bring these tools to your practice, which is going to produce better outcomes for your clients, and it's going to drive more business for you.
Thank you, Steve.